I'm going to introduce this esteemed panel tonight. Imam Ali Ghazvini from the Islamic Cultural Center of Fresno. Okay, welcome. In no particular order, Marty Robinson, Supervisor Specialist, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Welcome, Marty. Mark, maybe we can hold our applause till the end. Great, thank you. Mark Cullors, Assistant U.S. Attorney, U.S. Department of Justice. Mark, where are you? Okay. Lisa Smithcamp, District Attorney, County of Fresno. Welcome, Ms. Smithcamp. Jerry Dyer, Chief of Police, Fresno City Police Department. Margaret Mims, our Sheriff. Jim Uvino, Superintendent of Schools, Fresno County Office of Education. Where are you, Jim? Vincent Biondo, PhD, Associate Professor, CSUF, Fresno. Vincent? Rabbi Rick Weiner, Temple Beth Israel. Rabbi? Reverend Norman Broadbent, PhD, Senior Minister, First Congregational Church. That's right. Dr. Andreas Borges, Professor of International and Comparative Law, San Joaquin College of Law. Welcome. And Thomas Knowles, at the far end, a good friend and retired FBI agent and counterterrorism consultant. Now, a welcome to all of our panelists. So again, tonight's session is about Islam versus ISIS. And the opening statements will come from Imam Ghazvini about Islam, and then we'll turn that over to the other religious figureheads, and then eventually to all of our law enforcement. This week, which is the beginning of our Independence Week, here celebrating the independence of our country, it also happens to be, was it last night when Jupiter and Venus were the closest in 2,000 years? And also happens to be halfway through the month of Ramadan. So you will see a full moon. I'm going to predict that when we go outside for dinner. And we are halfway through Ramadan. Those of you that are familiar with the Muslim month of fasting, which is a reminder to all of us that we come to this earth as equals and we depart as equals with nothing on our backs. And what we do here in this journey determines our success both here and in the hereafter. And I want to read you this quote from Mark Twain. The two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. and tonight, we're here, many of us are here tonight because we understand that the world suffers a lot, not because of the violence of bad people, but because of the silence of good people. And tonight, we're not going to be silent. The Islamic community, the Islamic Cultural Center of Fresno, has spoken against ISIS and this terrorist organization for months. And I have many friends, many non-Muslim friends that ask me time and again, why are you not speaking up against this organization and this group? And why don't you speak up against the acts of violence committed by Muslims or the so-called Muslims across the world? Well, time and again we have. And unfortunately, the media doesn't pick up on these proclamations. Now, I'm very glad to see Channel 24 here tonight, and I believe we have somebody here from the Fresno Bee. I hope they're still here or they're arriving. Still here. Thank you. But ISIS is an important issue, is an important threat to world security, and we've marketed this event with lots of press releases. Again, I'm glad to have two organizations here tonight, but many of the others in the Valley are missing. So that's our challenge. So we hope that you take this message tonight and share it on Facebook, tweet it, and get it out to the rest of our community. Again, ISIL is a terrorist organization that is using Islam as a tool to recruit, and they're anything but Islamic. Muslims have denounced this barbaric organization, including the Islamic Cultural Center of Fresno. It is also important to note that we need law enforcement and our government to acknowledge the difference between ISIL and Islam and not paint all Muslims with the same brush. this is part of the challenge that we face as Muslim Americans. When law enforcement steps up and actually distinguishes distinguishes between acts of terrorism by a few that call themselves Muslim and the rest of the Islamic community, it empowers us even further. But when we get all brushed with the same paint, it makes it a lot more challenging. So in order to eradicate this group, we must come together as a community, and we must pull all resources and do it early enough to stop its viral spread. To that end, we should collaborate with all agencies, all faith groups, all law enforcement means that are willing supporters of this effort to help put a stop to this nuisance and this threat to our national security, threat to the name of Islam. And we want to do it here, and we want to start this movement here tonight in Fresno, California. And we hope that this spreads all across this nation and all across this world. So thank you. And with that, I'd like to turn the mic over to Imam Qazmini to start us off. By the way, we will have a Q&A at the end for the last 15 or 20 minutes. There will be cards that will be handed out towards the end. Please fill out a card, and I will collect them to answer any of the questions you may have. Thank you and welcome.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Darius. Since I have your name signed here in the front of me, I'll introduce you, if you allow me. Darius Assami, most of you know, the president and CEO of Granville Homes. Thank you for putting together such a wonderful panel. We appreciate it. And since I have a beautiful view here from this angle, I would like to... Yes. I post this. My brothers are imams too, and I post this on... I send it to them, actually. I don't have a Facebook. And they say, what kind of joke you share with them? They laugh. All right. Thank you for joining us tonight. I would like to briefly talk about what Islam is all about. Islam is a monotheistic and Abrahamic religion followed by 1.7 billion Muslims around the world. Just like any other faiths, Muslims also divided into school of thoughts. The major school of thoughts of Muslims are 75% Sunnis and about 20% Shia Muslims. The divine book for Muslims is called the Quran, the Holy Quran. The prophet for Muslims is named the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He was born in the year 570 and died the year 632 AD. His ministry lasted for about 22 years. Articles of faith, what Muslims believe in. This is, I'm talking about all Muslims, not about a certain school of thought. Believing in one God. Believing in one God is a fundamental belief of all Muslims, the supreme power of the universe, the creator of the universe, and the source of all goods of the universe. He is beyond time, space, and gender. Don't ask me to explain that. This is how I learned it. He did create time and space. And we believe in all the prophets mentioned in the Old and the New Testament, and also prophets who were not mentioned in the Bible. We also believe in the day of judgment where everyone will be resurrected and come in front of God, and God will judge everyone based on their deeds. What are our religious practices? The most fundamental one, and I guess in every faith, is our prayer. We pray 5 times a day, at dawn, and then noon, afternoon, at sunset, and also at evening. Also fasting for 1 month. Today, it's actually the middle of Ramadan as we observe this month. We fast for 1 month from dawn to dusk for a few hours between dawn to dusk, and we abstain through these hours from food, drinks, smoking, and sensual acts. Also, almsgiving is part of our faith. We have two different kinds of almsgiving. One, at the end of Ramadan, every household has to pay a charity to those who are less fortunate, and also on annual basis, some Muslims pay 2.5% of their income, or Shia Muslims pay 20% of the additional amount after their spending for 1 year. So it would be similar to 2.5% of your income. So the tax in the Shia school of thought is on your saving, not on what you spend. And finally, we have a pilgrimage that once upon lifetime, if someone is able to go, he or she has to go to Mecca to perform pilgrimage. And there are many others, but these are the most important religious practices. What is ISIS? We believe ISIS is a political organization that was born out of the terrorist organization Al-Qaeda. I think they have done a good job in fighting Al-Qaeda in many places, but most of Al-Qaeda supporters have joined ISIS, led by a group of who were officers of Saddam army. Their head is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who was an officer in Saddam's army. They do adopt a terror tactics to create fear. This is what they are good about, to create fear and their approach to their goals. So they really, even the way they look, huge beard and long hair, they deliberately want to look very fearful, so create fear in the hearts of people. Some sources estimate their fighters to be about 30,000 soldiers. How they get their revenues, as far as the media says, from donations, especially from Gulf states such as Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Emirates. Also from taking ransoms, selling oil illegally, and also selling artifacts of the areas that they seize, seizing banks and imposing taxes. Where the soldiers come from? Media says one-third of their soldiers, fighters, come from non-local areas from all over the world. The estimated number is 90. They come from 90 different countries. The estimated number of fighters who come from the Western world is 3,400. And from United States, it's about 150 to 200. Obviously, they did not travel on camel to that area. They flew from some airports, and this is why we believe the international community have not done its job in controlling the air travel toward that area. I think the international community can do a much better job than this. The most important and dangerous tool available to ISIS today is the social media. I heard that in the media they send about 80,000 messages every single day. This is how they recruit, this is how they broadcast their news, and this is how they influence individuals. Brookings Institute has made a research. I would recommend everyone to study it, a very interesting research about ISIS and social media. They say between September and December, they created about 46,000 accounts. about 20% of those supporters speak English, and the rest, most of them, they speak Arabic. This is also another slide where most of the supporters come from. Most of them come from, what happened? All right. It seems that most of the supporters come from Saudi Arabia. Islam versus ISIS. These are a very short items where ISIS deliberately contradicts and violates the principles of Islam and the Quran. Let me share a very short joke with you. An ISIS checkpoint, the ISIS soldier would ask people if they are Muslims or not. And then there is a Christian couple approaching. So the ISIS fighter asked the Christian couple, "Are you Muslim?" The husband said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, recite a verse from the Quran." And the husband recited a verse from the Bible. And the ISIS fighter said, "Okay, go." The wife said, how you dare to say this?" He said, "Don't worry, they are so ignorant with the Quran that they do not know which verses belong to the Quran or which one belongs to the Bible." So these are a few principles that they deliberately contradict and violate. Islam actually denounces compulsion in faith. This is a clear verse in the Quran. What ISIS says, what ISIS does, they do force people to accept the faith of Islam, or actually their own faith, or face death or displacement. Also, Islam promotes peaceful relations with other communities and nations. The only policy ISIS adopts is to attack other peoples, invade lands, and they have not signed any peace agreement with any community or any country. Islam acknowledges, places of worship. Islam acknowledges other faiths, especially people of book, faiths of book. This is Jews, Christians, Sabians, Zoroastrians. Islam do acknowledge them and respect them. They have been a lot of followers of those faiths lived among Muslims for so many centuries. ISIS do not respect people of other faiths, also Muslims of other school of thoughts. Islam honors women. Treating women equally in Islam is a practice of our faith. ISIS has started actually selling women in the slavery market. This happened last year when they started attacking and capturing women from other faiths, and also Muslim women too. Treating captives with respect and human rights. This is part of our faith too. You will see, I think, in your handouts, a list of these items written, if you would like to take one home. ISIS do not respect the captives. You've seen a lot of photos how they burned alive, how they killed their captives. Islam encourages us to study nations before us and protect our global heritage. ISIS do not do that. ISIS actually attack and destroy all the artifacts, museums, places of ancient heritage. And finally, Islam respects all places of worship, because in our faith we believe in these places of worship the name of God is mentioned, so we consider them a sanctuary and protected by our faith. Unfortunately, ISIS do not follow that path. Thank you very much.
Am I my brother's keeper? I think we all have to keep that in mind. And I say that because we are coming at the end of very tumultuous 2 weeks out from Charleston. And as most whites have probably never visited a black church in parts of the South, and maybe parts of Fresno and Clovis and the Central Valley here, so is probably true that most Christians or Jews or others have never visited a mosque. And so in order to stand with you, I have to know you, and I have to understand you. And so if we are all Americans, we are all together in this country, we all want the best for our families and each other. And to do that, we have to know each other. We have to understand each other. So I think the second message I wanted to set across is that this is a good start. And I hope this can continue both in our schools with Mr. Jovino and other educators, and with our faith leaders to sort of live by those words and really get to know each other, because that is at the root of defeating ISIS. ISIS preys on the ignorant, the lonely, the disenfranchised, the confused, and to the extent that we combat them through our civic engagement, through our shared experiences both in each other's faiths and each other's communities, then we will defeat ISIS. Thanks.
Great words of wisdom, Mark. Thank you. Thank you for that. Now I'd like to turn the mic over to Marty Robinson of the FBI.
Thank you, Mr. Semi. I'm happy to be with you all this evening, as the other panelists are. I'm going to, if I could, in my just couple of minutes, bring this down to a level where I'm going to make a specific request to all of you here, as well as to members of our community at large. I supervise here in the FBI office the Joint Terrorism Task Force. It's my officers, as well as our partner local and state agencies, that are on the forefront of finding those that would commit acts of terrorism within our community. And it is something to go home every night and hope I wake up the next morning without my cell phone going off and being called about an act that myself and or my officers failed to stop in time. And it hurt people, and potentially people died because we missed it. I have very few officers to cover all of the counties in which I have jurisdiction over. I cover counties that comprise hundreds of thousands of people with just one squad of individuals. I am unable to do my job at a 100% success level without your engagement. And so my specific request here tonight is that as a community, we report, we provide me the information that I need in order to keep our community safe. And it seems like a simple request because it's always on the news somewhere else. It's in Canada, it's in Australia, it's in Boston or New York, or just this last week it was on a beach in Tunisia. And so we say to ourselves, it won't happen here, it's always somewhere else. But then we find it might be a member of our own family or our next door neighbor that's doing something or talking about something that's making us nervous or question. And then all of a sudden we have that hard decision to make, which is, should I say something? And that's where it really begins to be hard. Do I have the ability to report something even though it might be somebody close to me that I know, or a member of my own congregation, or my own neighbor down the street that I've known for 10 years, or whatever the circumstance may be? But I don't wish on anybody to wake up one morning and find out that something bad happened and they didn't say something for whatever reason it may be, no matter how hard or difficult that decision may be. And so my simple request here tonight, out of all the things I might share with you in my few minutes, is to please call us. Even if you don't think it's a big deal, we are here to help and to make sure our community stays safe. But I can't do it without your involvement. And so I ask to make that hard decision if and when the time comes, and to let us know so that we can make sure that bad things don't happen to bad people. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. And I think Imam Ghazvini may have a few comments on that, but we have a very close relationship in this center, in the Islamic Cultural Center, with law enforcement to help prevent acts of violence that we may see coming. With that, now to more local law enforcement, Sheriff Mims, and then our district attorney. And we need to wrap up in the next 10 to 15 minutes.
Yes.
Before.
At 8:22, there's going to be a mass exodus in this room,
That's right. So Sheriff Mims, our district attorney, and Chief Dyer.
Thank you,
And of
Darius.
course, Tom knows for a wrap-up.
Thank you for opening up your place of worship to all of us and host this event tonight. You know, after 9/11, information flow really changed between our federal law enforcement partners and local law enforcement. It pointed out some real flaws that we had in our communication between each other. And I will, the local joke was information with the FBI was like Roach Motel. It went in and it didn't come out. And I have to tell you the immense change that has occurred since 9/11 and what great partners our federal agencies are. We have regular meetings with each other. We have personnel. Chief Dyer and I have personnel on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. We meet monthly with all law enforcement leaders of 2 counties, Fresno and Madera County, and we discuss issues that are important to all of us. And I really think that's an important thing for the public to know, like in this room, this is really a scene of solidarity here. It's the same thing with our law enforcement. We are in solidarity to try and keep you safe. I've been trying to do that for 35 years. That's been my life's task. And so I think the attack that is the best is the attack that we prevent. And we do that by communicating and talking to each other. ISIS influence. Of course, we want to prevent any kind of influence that ISIS has on the disenfranchised or impressionable young people. Because that is what they're doing now, using social media to do that. And it is truly the ignorant that will ignore certain signs that an attack may be imminent. And we are really asking for help. It could happen here. It definitely could happen here. And we cannot turn a blind eye to it. No matter how small the piece of information is, I hear this a lot. Well, this happened, but I didn't want to bother you by calling you. Let us determine whether or not it's real or not. That's what we're supposed to do. That's why we involved in public service. Remember, Timothy McVeigh was caught by a state trooper on a vehicle stop because he had expired registration tags on his car. It's going to be the frontline law enforcement person that is going to be the first responder if there's an incident, or the one to come up with information because of you've told somebody that can prevent an attack here locally. And we do not work in a vacuum. We cannot do our jobs all by ourselves. We depend on you, the public, so much. We truly have to be crime-fighting partners. And that's what we're hoping we can really help emphasize tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheriff. And now our district attorney, Lisa Smith-Camp.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. It's truly an honor. I think I'm the newest member to my job of this panel. I was sworn in as Fresno County District Attorney in January of 2015 after spending several years as a prosecutor in both Fresno and Madera counties. And as I sit here, I could just say what Mark Culler said and what Jim Yavino said and what Sheriff Mims said, because we all sort of share some of the same thoughts. I had the opportunity to do an internship at the United States Attorney's Office, and I hope I don't date you, Mark Cullors, but I worked for Mark Cullors when I was a law student. And I was in awe of him then, and I am in awe of him today as I sit here, because as I sit here, even though I am the district attorney of Fresno County, I am a citizen. I was born here, I was raised here, and I'm a mom. And that is my most important job, and I wasn't teasing, even though sometimes I really do try to be funny, that I did take my Facebook page down because of a recommendation that came from the FBI with regard to the way ISIS was attacking law enforcement officials. And when you're a district attorney or you're a deputy district attorney, you don't really get the same sort of association with being law enforcement sometimes as Sheriff Mims or Chief Dyer or people who are in the FBI of actually being a boots on the ground type of law enforcement officer, because we do our work in the courts, but we are a branch of law enforcement. Even as the elected district attorney, I had to put the safety of my children and the safety of my family above that of getting to see the photos of my girlfriends from college and their children and all of the fun things that we all like to do on Facebook as regular citizens. And it was a real eye-opener to me how dangerous really ISIS has become to the average citizen, whether you're a beat cop or you're an elected district attorney or you are the deputy district attorney in any county, in any city, in any state. And so what I can do tonight is do one thing, is pledge to participate. Because as Mr. Uvino said, we are all here learning as well as representing our specific agencies. And I'm here learning. I've learned so much just sitting here tonight as a panelist, learning what we can do. And so what I can pledge to do is to participate. The same way that Mr. Robinson's asking you to participate and Sheriff Mims is asking you to participate. Because as prosecutors and law enforcement officials, we cannot do our jobs without the participation of the citizens of the community. So I will pledge to you to participate and ask you to do the same. And what I will participate in is the conversation and the communication and the commitment to combat ISIS and to combat terror. In law enforcement, just specifically in the DA's office, just to echo some of the things that Mr. Cullors says, I have made a personal commitment as the elected district attorney to work with Fresno Unified School District and the Fresno County Office of Education and Central Unified School District. We have a Superintendent Berg in the back, to really work with the schools and the educators to prevent truancy and to promote school attendance. Because as Mr. Cullors said, and I will not repeat, the children who are going into ISIS and who are being recruited by ISIS are what I just call the lost children. They're all the things that he described. And so we're doing our best to engage in the community, to participate not just in the prosecution of criminals and the prosecution of crime, but the prevention of crime. Because being a mom is my number one job and being the district attorney is my number two job. And so my commitment is very strong to the children of this community so that they do not become lost children. And I will pledge to you that as long as I'm in office, the Fresno County District Attorney's Office will do everything that we can to participate with children from all walks of life, all races, all religions, all socioeconomic backgrounds. And if you come to the DA's office, you'll see them. They're parading through on a weekly basis. We have schools and summer programs coming through. It's kind of becoming a joke in my office that we have, it's preschool. And it's elementary school and it's junior high at the DA's office, because we're bringing them in and we're giving them tours and we're really trying to engage and trying to be positive role models for them so that they don't become those lost children. Thank you so much for inviting me, Darius.
Thank you, Lisa. Actually, we have a surprise guest that's just called in. That's Congressman Costa driving, and he wanted to just chime in for a brief 2 minutes before we turn over to our...
2 minutes, right? That's Jim Costa?
Is
that a different Jim Costa?
No, it's going to be a record. Jim, you're on.
Go ahead, Mr. Costa. You're live, Mr. Costa.
Okay. Darius, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I want to thank you for inviting me and the members of the Islamic community to the center tonight. I apologize. I have a previous commitment here been all afternoon in Western Merced County, and I'm in Las Vegas tonight. But my heart and my thoughts are with all of you, because the Islamic Center is a place of gathering for peace and for the extension of what the world community needs. And the important meeting that you're having this evening with our district attorney and with local law enforcement to talk about the critical threat, the danger that ISIL is providing around the world, and the potential for domestic threat is very, very real. And of course, we've seen the examples of it throughout the arc of the Middle East, and most recently last week in Tunisia and in France. But having just come back this weekend with members of the European Parliament and members of Congress, I can tell you our weekend discussion was dominated by national security, world security, defense, as well as energy and trade, and all three of them are related. But the importance of the Islamic Center bringing this meeting together tonight for our community here in the Valley is to carry a message, and to carry the message that Islam is a religion of peace, and that these terrorists do not reflect the heart and soul of what is one of the major religions of the world. And your outspokenness tonight and the message that you are carrying is something that we all share together. And I have been honored over the years to be many times at the Islamic Center, and we've had important conversations. And I want to ensure that as your federal representative, I will continue to do everything that I possibly can to support your efforts and to support local law enforcement in these efforts to ensure that we do everything we can to ensure that this terrorist activity around the world, and sadly here in our country, ultimately is ended. That's our challenge. That's our goal. And this meeting tonight is an important effort in that long road that we march together to bring this end.
Great, thank you, Jim. Yes, we heard you, and thank you for your comments.
All have a part to play, and tonight's efforts is a part of that effort, and we must work together.
Great, thank you, Jim, for those comments. I also want to acknowledge a few of the dignitaries that are among us here tonight. Supervisor Mendez, welcome. We have council members Brandau, Capriolio, and Olivier with us. Also, Fresno Unified School District Board members Valerie Davis, Carol Mills, and Brooke Ashton. Also, Mike Berg from Central Unified School District, our superintendent, Mike. And representatives from Congressman Valadeo's office, Tal Eslick. And Congressman Nunes' office, Rudy Mendoza. Now to Chief, that was 2 minutes. That was a record.
It was 4 minutes, but it was a record.
Thank you.
All
Chief.
right. Well, thank you. First off, thank you everyone for being here this evening. It really is an important issue. Thank you, Darius, for the invitation. Imam, thank you for opening up your doors. And you know, we really are a partner to the Islamic Culture Center, to the folks here of Islamic Faith, and we have had a great partnership. That means sharing information and being there for one another. And it really began September 11th for me. September 11th, as we all know, was a terrorist attack on our nation that really shocked the conscience of our nation. And as a result of that, we as Americans felt vulnerable for really the first time, perhaps since Pearl Harbor. And what happened was a number of our folks in America, there was a lot of anger, a lot of hostility, and unfortunately some of that hostility and anger was geared towards either people of the Islamic faith or of the Sikh religion. And that stemmed from a lack of awareness, a lack of education, and ignorance. And that is why forums such as this and an opportunity to come together and talk about the differences between ISIS and Islam, people of Islamic faith, the people that stand for peace, versus what ISIS stands for, and they stand for terror. And but what happens today is the same holds true. And that is as a result of some of the shocking incidents that have occurred from ISIS, the beheadings, the brutality, the things that they have done, not only in other countries, but also here, or attempted to do here, has created that same level of anger and in some cases hostility. And so there are people out there that do not understand the difference between the Islamic faith and ISIS. And it is so important that we recognize that. To say that ISIS represents the principles of Islam and the Islamic faith is to say that David Koresh represented the principles of Christianity. Just because he claimed to be a Christian and raised Seventh-day Adventist doesn't mean his teachings and what he did and the incidents that occurred in 1993 in Waco, Texas, had anything to do with Christianity. But individuals like this hide behind a false religion. And so I believe it all begins with education. And that's why we're here tonight. We all have a vested interest in our community. Whether we are from local, state, or federal law enforcement, whether we are of the Jewish faith, Christian faith, or Islamic faith, we really do need to stand shoulder to shoulder, because we know that there are individuals in our community today that are easily influenced. These are people with low self-esteem, people that are looking for a cause, that are easily influenced on social media. And we know that there are those out there that are potential lone wolves that will become self-radicalized, and they were the ones that inflict terror upon our country. And we have to stand close together. Now, I want to make sure when we say in law enforcement, report suspicious activity, that doesn't necessarily mean that we report people based on their appearance, because that's what we saw after September 11th. People calling in and reporting suspicious activity when it was really a suspicious appearance. Somebody from the Middle East who had a beard. God forbid they had a camera standing in front of a government building, because then they became ultimately very suspicious to people. And what we're looking for in law enforcement is not appearance. We're looking for people based on their actions, people that are saying things or doing things or have become loners, who have a low self-esteem. Those are the people that we want you to report, because they always give a clue. But most often that clue is ignored. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of this.
Thank you, Chief. And Tom Knowles, our retired FBI and counterterrorism specialist, to wrap up.
Thanks, Darius. I think Darius asked me to come here tonight because I've spent 18 years pursuing counterterrorism and living in places like Beirut and Kandahar and Damascus. And as Mark said, the way you become educated the greatest on any of this is to live and walk amongst the people. And I was a Valley kid. You know, I was raised in Kingsburg. Let's not talk about the exposure that I got there. I mean, you know, and so, and I also spent a considerable time working out of Tel Aviv. And so when you get out there and you get a chance to really meet and walk and talk and break bread with folks, you really find the commonalities that we all have. And And it's really simple. We all just want to live a peaceful life, and we want to be able to live it according to our own personal views. Thank goodness in the United States, for most parts, we can do that, especially when you compare it to other countries around the world. And the one thing that bothered me the most when I came back prior or just immediately following 9/11, especially after living overseas and having some extremely close friends, Muslim friends to this day that are out of Lebanon, was how everybody was stereotyping. But we have a history of this in this country, and every country does. Everybody's based on emotions, and emotions get involved and common sense gets thrown out the window. So it's not just the United States and American people, it's just that we're so large and we have such a position in the world that everything we do, the world sort of flows around it, that when we do overreact, it has a tremendous impact on the rest of the world. And so from what I looked at, and what we had said at the time back in counterterrorism in Washington was that, you know, if you look at the greatest numbers, when people try to stereotype Islam, they say that maybe 1% have been radicalized. Well, you're talking about 1.7 billion people, and you're talking about less than 1%? Okay, it's still a lot of people, but the point is, it's less than 1%. So from the law enforcement perspective, what I was always trying to tell my folks is, you got to use this just like any other crime. You've got to base it on the facts of what's occurring. On the other hand, it is a lot of people. And the only way that we can, and law enforcement can work together, is that don't leave it up to law enforcement to try to figure out and decide who's good, who's bad within communities. Because when you're on the outside looking in, we all know how blurred it can be. And what I use most often, and conversations that Darius and I have had, my wife is Italian. She's an East Coast Italian. Her dad didn't even come here till he was 53. I mean, this is that true Italian-American family. And when I would tell a lot of law enforcement friends that, the first thing, what do they hear? Oh, it's mafia, huh? Mafia. It's a joke, but it's not a joke. When you look at what happened to the Italians when they first came here and what happened when the mafia first came here, everyone to this day tends to give the government, the FBI, credit for breaking the backs of the mafia, right? But that's not really what happened. The FBI provided the tools, the government provided the tools to break the backs. But in reality, it was Italian Americans who stepped up and said, you know what? These idiots are defacing our name. They're humiliating our country. We have to bring this to an end. And they took that bold step to come up and to report their friends, to talk about their brothers, their sisters. Well, not really in those days. The women really weren't involved. But that was a very, very bold move. And so what I would say to the Muslim community of the United States is, ISIL is selling an ideology that you can't beat with weapons. We all know that. It's like the drug war. You can't win the drug war with guns. You can't win and beat this ideology with guns. It'll never, ever happen. And I saw that, especially when I was in Kandahar 6 weeks after 9/11. You can't win this thing with guns. You have to win it by beating the ideology. And that's through education. And where does that come from? Home. It comes from home. And it comes from parents engaging with those kids and those friends that they see that are starting to drift. We have teenage boys that are getting up there now, but several of their friends have gone through some rough times. And we've seen it from our position. We understand they're drifting. And their parents are oblivious to it. And we'll reach out and we'll pull them into our home. And we'll try to get them back on track. And that's what I would plead must occur here. because we cannot be fearful of law enforcement. For them trying to do their job, somebody's got to do it. But at the same time, we want them to play within the rules, but if they're on the outside and they have no way of looking in, somebody's got to help them. And that's the community. That's all of us. But in this particular situation with this radical Islamic, I won't even use the language I want to use, word that's being floated out there, we have got to put a stop to this ideology. And that's really all it is. We have to fight and beat the ideology, and especially with the youth. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Tom. Those are great words and great way to wrap up. As a Muslim American, I'm very proud to be a citizen of this country. Many Muslims left their country of birth by choice to immigrate. They left, like my family, my brothers and my parents, we left our country by choice to come to this beautiful country for the opportunities it provided, for the freedoms it provided us, above all for the hope for a better future for us and our families. And many Muslims have immigrated to this beautiful country for that reason. We really have, unfortunately, out of time. I want to take one or two questions, and then Imam Ghazvini, I think, has got a final statement. One question there? Yes? Brief? Yes. Okay.
Can this panel really be replicated throughout this country? Being that I've heard that this is somebody, can it be replicated?
That's a great question. Can this panel be replicated throughout the country? We hope that Fresno, California will be number one, be the first in this kind of an event and in this kind of a panel, and start a movement across this country of denouncing ISIS, Muslims, Christians, Jews, law enforcement, educators coming together and denouncing this group of thugs. And we want to do it from this country. We want to do it in Fresno and hopefully spread this throughout the country. Anybody? Thank you. Any other questions? Reverend Franklin is with us this evening. Thank you for joining us, Jim. Did I miss any of our elected officials? I think Senator Berryhill's representative was going to be here this evening. No. Okay. If there's no other questions, okay. I think we're ready to break our fast.
Right,
Imam
yes.
Ghazvini, do you have any final?
Thank you, Darius. Behind me is a frame that has a calligraphy from the Quran and also the flag of the Union. These two articles represent our identity as American Muslims. Of course, there is the flag of the state, but we are proud of our identity as Muslims and as Americans. Whether physicians, nurses, teachers, farmers, home builders, the Muslim community do contribute to the well-being of this country and their community and other communities and their families. We are very proud of, I am very proud of what the community is offering. Tonight, I would like to extend our gratitude to faith leaders, people of other faiths, those who are on the panel and those who are in the audience and those who could not make it tonight. We are really thankful to you guys because of your support. Because of your support, we are blessed to live a normal life in this country because of you great friends that we have. And we are very thankful for the law enforcement agencies. They have done a tremendous job, especially at times that we needed them. And I would like to recognize and acknowledge their continuous support. May God bless you all the time. We denounce terrorism. We denounce and reject ISIS. I would like to conclude with a very clear message tonight that ISIS is not Islamic. ISIS is against Islam. ISIS is targeting Muslims and non-Muslims, Islamic civilizations and Islamic values, just like any other criminals. Today, we announce our moral outrage against what ISIS is doing, and hopefully we get to understand that ISIS is a global security threat. It's not a regional now. It's not in one area or two. It has, unfortunately, a power and a strength to hit anywhere. And it needs global resources to fight ISIS, and especially to fight it on ideological and on military aspect, on both. And this is why we need faith leaders, we need the professors, and we need law enforcement and military agencies to work together to fight this disease. May God bless you all. Thank you very much.